Chapter 3 of The Spirit of Intimacy. Let's get reading, because this is called We Are Reading. So the name of this chapter is The Embrace of Community. So cool, let's get into it. So community is the spirit, the guiding light of the tribe, whereby people come together in order to fulfill a specific purpose, to help others fulfill their purpose, and to take care of one another. The goal of the community is to make sure that each member of the community is heard and is properly giving the gifts he has brought to this world. Without this giving, the community dies, and without the community, the individual is left without a place where he can contribute. The community is that grounding place where people come and share their gifts and receive from others. That's like a manifestation of that Ubuntu philosophy. I am because we are, whereby the primacy of the community is seen. You know, in African philosophy, the community is primal, the communal is prime, the individual, quote unquote, is only has any meaning or purpose or relevance in the context of the community. And that's very different to some of the modern Western philosophies, whereby everything is seen as being primarily about the individual rise, individual ownership of things, and all that sort of stuff, individualism. And as we read in Yurugu, we've seen how individualism has wreaked havoc in the West and in societies dominated by Western ways of thinking. Because obviously, if you're atomized and separated from everybody else, then you're going to be missing out on all of the spiritual and cultural and social and ethical moorings and meaning, actually, that only comes through relationship with others. And then we continue. When you don't have, oh, here we go. She might be about to say the same thing as I've just said. When you don't have community, you are not listened to. You don't have a place you can go to and feel that you really belong. You don't have people to affirm who you are and to support you in bringing forward your gifts. This empowers the psyche, making you vulnerable to consumerism and all the things that come along with it. Also, it leaves many people who have wonderful contributions to make holding back their gifts, not knowing where to put them. And without the unloading of our gifts, we experience a blockage inside, which affects us spiritually, mentally, and physically in many different ways. We are left without a home to go to when we need to be seen. Interesting, yeah. So that's exactly it. She just said it more eloquently than I said it. That she's kind of pinpointed one of the key elements of the malaise or the breakdown of societies in the West, because people are atomized individuals, and when you're an atomized individual, all of your gifts and I like how she's focusing there on the fact that we all have gifts, and our gifts are for the purpose of ourselves, yes, but also for the purpose of others. And if we're not in community, then we can't share our gifts with others. That really, really resonates. We all felt that. We all saw that, of course, during all of those lockdowns that we had a couple of years ago. It's weird to be talking about the lockdowns as if a couple of years ago, but it was a couple of years ago now that they finished. But we all felt that. We all saw how our mental health plummeted during that time because we were cut off from one another. And being cut off from one another means that we can't shine our light into their lives, and also they can't shine their light into our lives. And it's kind of like she's saying that the whole purpose of us and our gifts is to share with others. One of the principles of the Dagara concept of a relationship is that it's not private. When we talk about our relationship in the village, the word our is not limited to two. And this is why we find it pretty hard to live a relationship in a modern culture that is lacking true community. In the absence of community, two people are forced to say, this relationship is ours, when in fact, a community should be claiming ownership. I'm going to try and resist the urge to keep kind of ad-libbing or adding in my commentary because, I want to let her speak. But that just completely resonates with my experience of marriage and parenting so far. If you look at my videos on my channel, you'll probably find a fair few shorts in particular, but a fair few videos where I'm complaining about the isolation of parenting, and I'm complaining about how hard it is to be handling children and the marriage and all this sort of stuff, because we are so isolated from one another. And it's a shame because we take it for granted now. We take it as this is the normal thing to do, partly because we're so distrustful of one another, that we're like, well, I'm not going to let anyone else into my business because they might, there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of fear of bad-minded people and even spiritual attack and all that sort of stuff. So because of that, we are atomized, and this is hard. It's very, very hard to have an actual proper relationship in this individualized setting, which is so different from traditional African cultures. We've read in, we've read in a few books. We read in Kindezi, we read in Oyeronke Oyewumi's The Invention of Women. We read in Yurugu, and we're reading it here as well. The same kind of thing keeps being echoed over and over again. Community must be the foundation of everything, and all our relationships and all our activities must be based in community. Otherwise, we're just going to suffer. The absence of a true community leaves a couple totally responsible for themselves and anything else around them. It narrows down their ways of getting needs met, so that their relationship becomes their community. And if it is not able to fulfill this role, then the individual begins to feel like a failure. It affects the psyche so dramatically that they feel that there's no place for them. What they thought was their support group, i.e. their partnership, is unable to satisfy their needs. It's very strange to regard two people as a community. Where is everybody else? On my first visit home after moving to the United States, I told my mother just Malidoma and I lived in this house. Malidoma was her husband, was Sobonfu Somé's husband. They're both transitioned now. They're both ancestors now. Both of them transitioned fairly recently as well. So rest in power to both of them. They're shining. Keep shining, both of them. She thought I was the craziest person she'd seen. To her, living like this is inconceivable. It means that there isn't any kind of outside energy coming to give support and strength to our relationship, and that we are basically left on our own to figure things out, which is absolutely impossible. Asheo. With one person, it's hard to see very far. Two people, you can see a little more. But if you have a whole group of people really caring about you and telling you you are doing the right thing, we want to be around, give us your gifts, it helps you fulfill your purpose. Even the most stubborn people will get beyond their stubbornness in order to work on their life purpose. But with just two people, it's really too much to ask, or even with a nuclear family. In my own marriage, I bring as many people as I can into the relationship. We also get back home as much as possible. How do we bring more people in? We constantly monitor the relationship and, through ritual, create community to give us the support that we need. This fuels us so that we can continue what we are doing here. When there are collisions in my marriage, I call upon this community. I know that without their help, the fire of our relationship might have been extinguished. I should point out that I believe Malidoma and Sobonfu Somé did actually separate eventually. But, I guess the point that you're making there, they probably would have separated earlier if it wasn't for the help that they had from their community. Here in the West, we may never have the kind of community we had back in Africa, but at least we can have a sense of it by allowing friends to be a part of what we are doing. 15 minutes of communication with others can help in a deep way to make up for a lack of community. Friends and family provide you with a container, a safe container, where you can go if you need support, if you need help with ritual, if you need somebody to give you a hug, if you need to talk to somebody and get another perspective on something. You are free to do whatever you want with the advice they give you, but it helps to bring the spirits of other people into your life. It gives you so many more eyes to see and helps overcome limitations. Sometimes you will be spiritually blind to something, and a friend can be aware of that very thing. If you don't reach out to friends and family, your reality can become pretty limited with the input of these people. But with the input of these people, it widens. And that, obviously, that's so true, isn't it? Because I know for a fact. So I had a situation a few years ago where I was in a job and it was going terribly, but I put all my eggs into that basket. I really wanted to keep that job because it was closer to where I live. And it just, I just felt like it, which meant I could be, closer to my family and so on and so forth. And I'd get, the weeks and weeks were going by. It was obviously becoming a disastrous situation. But it took me really to start to talk to other people, friends of mine, old colleagues, for them to say to me, well, Ellie, why don't you just get another job in London? Because this job wasn't in London. I said, just get another job in London. And I'd closed off the idea of London for some reason. I'd shut it off completely. And it took getting outside counsel from others to sort of snap out of that funk that I was in. Maybe it was a spiritual thing. Like I was just blinded. I was so attached to the job. And it took speaking to these other people to kind of, share that with me and kind of break me out of this blindness that I'd had. I certainly think as well that in our relationship and our marriage, and from a perspective of, the parenting aspects of it, it's always, we've got a couple of friends in particular. There's one couple in particular, and one or two others who we know that when we come together, they're similar age to us, similar situation, young children and so forth, and we can just chill and like they get it, I get it, we get it, and we can just, help each other out basically. Like we can help with some of the babies or the dealing with the children. One of us can branch off and kind of do most of that, while the others are chatting and setting the world to right, and we can rotate it kind of thing. And the children get to experience some of the sort of parenting, quote unquote, from them, and their children get a little bit of that parenting from us as well. So yeah, you absolutely, when you're in community, even in that little drop of community, just having some good friends, it makes the world a difference. And one of the things, sorry to just add as well, is that I think that if we had more of this going on in our communities, we would be able to deal with a lot of the issues with regard to, for example, abusive relationships, of various different kinds of abusive relationships, if there was a lot more light, because as they say, light is the best disinfectant. So absolutely, all this stuff is like resonating hugely with me, for sure. Peace to everyone who's joined us. Peace, Leah. Nice to see you. Leah Boggs, you came up with a phrase. What was that phrase? Settler colonial fruit. Because there was this video about some Muzungu woman who opened up a watermelon, scooped out all the actual watermelon, and then put in grapes and things in it, and then cut the watermelon. And it was like watermelon skin with grapes inside. And it was like, what the hell was the point of that? And Leah called it settler colonial fruit, which I just found so funny. So thank you for that. Thank you for brightening up my week with that. And my brother Oni, peace out to you, the pro-black perspective. Peace. He is doing a video series currently, I believe, on Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I'm well behind. I was on this guy goes deep. He doesn't do my little hour and a half. He's like doing 3-4 hours sessions. So definitely recommend that you check Brother Oni out. But thank you guys for joining, and thanks everyone else who's joined us as well. So, sorry, where are we? Here we go. So, okay, yeah. So when you don't have a community of friends and family, it makes you base all your expectations on your marriage, and there's too much pressure, too much pressure on the other half. Absolutely, way too much pressure. It's inconceivable that. Well, it's understandable why, was it half marriages end in divorce? Because it's just too much. You can't expect your wife, for example, to tick all of the boxes for you. Great with the children, great with, great sensually, if you want to say, great with money. Do you know what I mean? Looks good, cooks and cleans, this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? It's just too much. You can't expect all of those things. And it's this mindset that we've got in where it's, oh yeah, I'll get married and live happily ever after. And clearly it's just setting up people for failure. It's just ridiculous pressure. I made a video a while ago called the ridiculousness of monogamy, or not monogamy, the ridiculousness of the nuclear family, or something like that. And I just, I completely agree. But let's get back to Sobonfu Somé on this. When people get their friends and families involved, they can make intimacy work. But people, they think things are private and that they have to keep everything to themselves. Keeping everything private usually kills a relationship. Most of the time, our crises are not complicated. When we keep them private, they grow fatter every day, and then they start to strangle us. So we must be open to other people in order for our relationships to work. I noticed that many people who are in women's groups, for instance, or men's groups, are able to put aside their fear of talking with others about their problems. And I think this is good. Problems in relationship will always be with us, but to let fear of sharing threaten your future is ridiculous. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. Because a problem shared is a problem halved. It's such a pithy cliche, but it's so true. Like, I'm learning right now about a certain thing that if you try and avoid something and run away from it, that's just going to make it just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. My children have got a book actually called Ruby's Worry, which is all about this little girl called Ruby who has a worry, and the worry is like a little cloud that's following her around. And then it's this, like, it starts off as a really, really small cloud, but then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then she can't do anything without this cloud getting in her way. And then she realizes, she meets someone else who's also got a big cloud next to them, some little child, other boy. And then she tells her worry to the boy, and her cloud starts to get a bit smaller. And then the boy tells her his worry, and the cloud gets a bit smaller, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. These children's books, I tell you, like, they are just called children's books, but they're really not children's books. They're for all of us. So people in the West can create a sense of community in their cities, just as people in West Africa have. They can do this by providing one another with continuous support. Each of us needs something to hang on to. That's why you have all these communities here and there, a group of women working on social issues, a group of men, and all these small groups pursuing a common goal. They are attempts to recreate a piece of that greater community that used to be and that has been destroyed. The only difference is that most of these communities don't focus on spirit. They tend to leave spirit outside of their activity, which is a mistake. It's another way of saying we are in control, when in fact, a true community must be based in spirit, on spirit. Spirit should be the leader and the guide for everybody in a community. And this is her main thing. And I'm quite interested to see how she's going to kind of explain that in more detail, because obviously it's like, to say, oh yeah, spirit brings us together. Spirit is the guide, spirit this, spirit that. But what does that mean? How does that work in practice? Well, I'm sure we're going to find out somewhat. Although this isn't a how-to book, as she made very clear early on. This is not a book to tell you, this is all the things you need to do in order to connect to a spirit, in order to become a better husband, better wife, better this, better that. It's not a how-to guide. It's more general than, I don't know what the word is. It's not quite so direct as that, but I'm sure we'll get some of those answers. One can argue that churches constitute such a community in the West. That would be the case if there were a way for churches to empower individuals. Then we would begin to approach the kind of community we're talking about in a village, with the village. But people do not go to church to reaffirm that spirit is inside them and that everyone is directly connected to spirit. You won't find a church where everyone gives out the Eucharist to one another. It may be hard for people who have lived all their life in the West to regard everything they own as belonging to the whole community. Got that right. But this is the case in the village. As a result, each person in the village contributes to the well-being of others. When you have a child, for instance, it's not just your child, it's the child of the community. From birth onward, the mother is not the only one who is responsible for the child. Anyone else can feed and nurture the child. If another woman has a baby, she can breastfeed any child, and it's perfectly all right. Sometimes when a mother wants to see her child, she can't because so many people are caring for him. I remember I used to trick my sisters all the time. I would go and get their children and disappear with them for a long time. My sisters would be wondering where the kids were, but they knew they were in safe hands. When you get married in this kind of context, it's not only you who gets married, it's the whole tribe. Every single person in that tribe, in that village, in your family is going to get married that day. You are the one giving them the opportunity to do that. And so people in the village will say, I'm getting married on such and such day, even though it's actually someone else's wedding. I'm pretty sure I've heard that before, that what she said there about it's not just you and the individual one marrying individual the other, it's everyone is marrying. Or I suppose I certainly feel that when it comes to marriage, we really ought to be seeing marriage much more, or just relationships, even if we don't do the legal bit of marriage, we need to be seeing those connections much more as a connection between families at the very least. So it's not just I am marrying my wife, it's my family is marrying her family, is joining to her family. And when you have that kind of mindset, then the stakes are much higher, and your selection process as far as selecting a mate and being sure whether that mate is right for you and so forth, it's not just your decision actually. And a lot of this stuff that we're reading here, even when she was talking there about anyone can look after a child, anyone can feed the child and so forth, probably maybe for you, but certainly for me, the first thing that's bubbling up in my mind is danger. Danger. Who are these people? I don't trust these people. Who are they? Where are they taking my child? I can't not have my child with me at all times. And that's a byproduct of, I think that's a byproduct of city life, first of all, because city life is impersonal by its very nature. It has to be impersonal because there are just too many people living in close proximity. And I think it also is, though, a byproduct of, or manifestation of, the Yurugu mentality, the mindset, the philosophy of Yurugu, which is individualism, fear, competition, and all those kinds of things. So clearly, what Sobonfu Somé here is talking about is not supposed to be taken as okay, cool, just start doing this wherever you are in the world. No, we have to understand that when she's talking about this is what used to happen back in the day in her culture. Understand that point, that what things were like in her culture, in her village in Burkina Faso back then in the 60s or 70s or whatever, is going to be very different even from what they are in Burkina Faso right now, in Ouagadougou or whatever other city, let alone in London, in Atlanta, in Delhi, Salvador, Rio de Janeiro, whatever, Abuja, Lagos, Kampala, and so on. So, but there are all of this stuff that we're doing. It's almost like excavating, digging back, Sankofa, digging in and seeing, okay, well, how were things back in the day, or how are things in different contexts, and then how can we, in some measure, apply some of these things in our lives day to day. And she's already said that you can do some of that by having those relationships with friends and bringing friends in. If a child grows up with the idea that mum and dad are her or his only community, then when she has a problem, if the parents cannot fix it, she doesn't have anybody else to turn to. The parents alone are responsible for whoever the child becomes. And this is a little bit too much to ask of just two people. And many times only one person is left to serve as parent.